So look, my baby mama do readings and stuff, right? So this type of stuff she do with her dude clients and the people she fuck. She do readings, do cleansing and stuff like that, but also she do sucking balls and all that also. You know what I'm saying? So when she's telling me, hey babe, I have to work. She have to get off the phone. She doing some whole other shit. But check this out. Look at the messages of her and Finesse 2 times. He talking about when you gonna clean me up. She talking about this and that. Check this out.
I want to go shake this ass. You look, she cute. Don't play with her. Period.
The headlights are bright.
The first call came in just before noon on January 23, 2025. A neighbor reported hearing loud voices followed by the unmistakable crack of gunfire. It wasn't just one shot, it was multiple. By the time emergency responders arrived at the modest home on Tanner Drive in Coppers Cove, Texas, it was already too late. Inside, a woman lay wounded, struggling for life. Within minutes, she was loaded into an ambulance. But the outcome was already written. The mother of 531-year-old Shazmin Clack was gone before doctors could even attempt to save her. News of her death spread quickly, not just within the tight-knit community, but across the internet, where just hours earlier Shazmin had been active, laughing, chatting, making plans. Her final social media post spoke of freedom, of moving forward, of a night out she had been looking forward to. Those who knew her didn't understand how, in the span of a few hours, she had gone from celebrating her independence to becoming a victim of brutal violence. Then came the realization someone had been watching her closely, someone who'd been waiting for the right moment to act. Authorities didn't have to look far. Witnesses at the scene pointed in one direction, toward a man who had just a day before launched into a tirade on social media, calling out Shazmin by name. The police moved fast. Within hours, they had a suspect in custody, a man with a history, a man who had been boiling over with resentment. His name was Alonzo Ezekiel Hunter, 27 years old, and he was the father of Shazmin's youngest child. Yet there was more to this case than a simple domestic dispute turned violent. In the days leading up to her murder, Shazmin had been engaged in a public back and forth with Alonzo, one that played out in front of thousands online. Accusations flew in both directions: allegations of infidelity, financial disputes, personal betrayals, each post adding more fuel to a situation already charged with anger. Alonzo had been vocal, but in the end it was his silence that said everything. Because just after Shazmin's final post, her declaration of freedom, he disappeared from social media. Hours later, she was dead. What pushed this situation over the edge? What was the breaking point? The answer, it seems, lies in the tangled web of online feuds, bitter confrontations, and a man who refused to let go. What unfolded between January 22nd and January 23rd wasn't just a crime. It was the result of days, weeks, even months of tension. And when the final moment came, it wasn't a decision made in the heat of passion. It was something else entirely. For those who knew her, Shazmin Clack was more than just a headline, more than just another name on a growing list of tragedies. To her family, to her friends, and most importantly, to her 5 children, she was the glue that held everything together. She was strong-willed, independent, and determined to give her kids the life they deserved. Born and raised in Texas, Shazmin's life was never easy, but she carried her burdens with a quiet resilience. She had learned early on that the world didn't offer handouts, and if she wanted something, she had to go out and make it happen. And that's exactly what she did. She built a life for herself, one that revolved around her children, her work, and the unwavering belief that she could carve out a better future. She was a mother first, and everything else second. Her social media was filled with moments that reflected that. Pictures of her children smiling, videos of them playing, posts about the challenges and joys of parenting. She wasn't perfect, and she never claimed to be, but she was present, she was trying, and in a world where so many struggle just to get by, that meant everything. But Shazmin was also a woman with dreams. She made a living through spiritual readings and energy cleanses, work that she believed in. Some people dismissed it, others questioned it, but for her it was more than just a business. It was a way to help others, to guide them, to offer clarity in a world that often felt chaotic. She had clients, repeat customers who trusted her insight. She was carving out a space for herself, slowly building something that she hoped would last. Yet, while she worked to create stability, the chaos in her personal life never seemed far behind. Her relationships were complicated. 5 children, multiple fathers, each connection carrying its own set of struggles. And among them all, there was one that stood out. A relationship that, in many ways, had become impossible to escape. He wasn't just another ex. He was the father of her youngest child, the one she still had to communicate with, the one who, no matter how much she tried, remained entangled in her life. Their relationship had been passionate once, filled with high moments and deep lows. They fought hard, loved hard, and in the end, neither could find a way to meet in the middle. The cracks had been there for a long time: financial struggles, trust issues, arguments over their child, and then there was the issue of control. Alonzo wanted things a certain way. When they were together, he wanted her loyalty. When they were apart, he wanted her to play by his rules. But Jasmine wasn't the type to be controlled. She made her own choices, and in the end, that might have been what set everything in motion. The tension between them had only gotten worse in recent months. Social media became their battleground. When they were happy, the world saw it. When they were at odds, it played out for thousands to witness. And by January of 2025, they were at war. It started small, passive-aggressive posts, cryptic messages. Then it escalated: accusations, name-calling, screenshots. And then the breaking point? Something that would push their already strained relationship past the point of no return. So, what was it? What was the final straw? Some say it was the tax money dispute, who had claimed their child that year. Others point to infidelity, rumors that had been circulating for weeks, fueled by posts, messages, and whispers of another man. But maybe it wasn't just one thing, maybe it was everything. The buildup of resentment, the feeling of losing control, the belief that he had been wronged in a way he couldn't accept. On January 22nd, Alonzo made his move. He went to social media and let it all out. Every bit of frustration, every ounce of anger. He exposed messages, claimed betrayal, and called Jasmine out in front of everyone. It was a performance, a public declaration of hurt and rage. But what he wanted was a reaction. Jasmine didn't give him one. Instead, she did something he hadn't expected. She ignored him. She posted her own message, one that said everything without addressing him at all. A message about moving forward, about freedom. And then she went out. She went live for an hour, talking about having fun, drinking, dancing. She laughed, joked, planned her night. If Alonzo was watching, and there's every reason to believe he was, what was going through his mind? Was he regretting what he had posted, or was he already making up his mind about what would come next? Whatever it was, within 24 hours, Jasmine would be gone. The night before everything changed, Jasmine Clack was in a celebratory mood. She had been through enough years of a toxic back and forth, relentless arguments, betrayals, and an exhausting cycle of control that seemed never-ending. But now she was free, or at least, that's what she wanted the world to believe. On the evening of January 22nd, 2025, Jasmine took to social media one final time. She posted a message, simple, defiant, and unmistakable in its meaning. She was done. No more manipulation, no more cheating, no more mind games. It was time to move on, and to drive the point home, she went live. The live stream lasted close to an hour. In it, Jasmine was laughing, talking, fixing her makeup, hyping herself up. She hadn't been out in a while, and tonight, that was changing. She told her viewers she wanted to let loose, have fun, get lost in the music, drink until the weight of the past few months blurred into the background. It was her way of reclaiming herself, of proving, both to the world and to one specific person, that she was untouchable. But was she? Alonzo Hunter was watching, maybe not in real time, maybe not with his name showing in the viewer count, but he saw, he always saw. For weeks, he had been publicly unraveling, throwing out accusations, posting messages dripping with resentment, mocking her, belittling her, trying to control the narrative before it slipped too far from his grasp. And now, there she was, smiling, dancing, letting go, making it clear to everyone, especially him, that she had moved on. Something in him snapped. The next morning, just hours after Jasmine's live stream, Alonzo did something different. He went silent. No more angry posts, no more comments laced with bitterness, no cryptic messages designed to make people wonder what he was planning, just silence. It was unlike him. Had he given up? Had he finally accepted that things were over? Or was this the moment when he had made his decision? By late morning, neighbors on Tanner Drive began to notice something unusual. A car parked just a little too long near Shazmin's house, a figure pacing, standing at the edge of the driveway, then disappearing, only to return minutes later. It wasn't alarming enough to call the police, not yet, but it was enough that people took note. Inside the house, Shazmin was getting ready for the day. She had no reason to think this morning would be different from any other. Maybe she was scrolling through her phone, checking messages, seeing if anyone from last night had posted pictures from the club. Maybe she was making breakfast for her kids, juggling a million things at once like she always did. Then a knock at the door. What happened next would be pieced together from what little evidence remained. There were no cameras inside the house, no security footage to show the exact moment when everything spiraled beyond control. But there were witnesses. The first sign of trouble came from a neighbor who had been outside tending to their yard. They would later tell police that they heard voices, raised, tense, cutting through the quiet of late morning.
All I knew was he was there with a gun. That's all I knew.
Late Saturday morning, Chantel Clack got the call that her younger sister, Shazmin, was in danger.
I was trying to call her and she wasn't answering. I was trying to call her son. He wasn't answering. And then he finally answered and said that she had got shot.
She tells me it was a case of domestic violence that ultimately left 5 children without their mother.
Her kids, that's what really mattered. Like, she loved her kids. It was all about her kids. It's just a lot. Basically starting all over without their mom.
According to Copper's Cove police, officers arrived and Shazmin was taken to a nearby hospital where she later passed away. And as her family and our community grieve this loss, they are remembering Shazmin for the person she was and the impact she had.
For those of us who didn't know Shazmin, give us a glimpse into who she was.
She was a very kind and giving person. Like, she helped a lot of people. Like, she would give literally the shirt off her back.
Now Chantel says they're taking it day by day, focusing on the kids as they all try to move forward and leave one last message for her sister.
I love her. And she did everything right, even though the situation turned out how it did. You did it. And we got the kids.
A man and a woman, Shazmin and Alonzo. They weren't just talking, they were arguing. Then a sudden shift, a sound, the kind that makes your stomach drop before your mind even registers what it is. Gunshots. Not one, several. A pause, then footsteps, fast, fading, a car door slamming shut, tires screeching against pavement, and then nothing. The neighbor ran inside, fumbling for their phone. Within seconds, 911 was dialed. The Copper's Cove Police Department responded immediately. Officers arrived to find the front door slightly ajar, a house that just moments earlier had been filled with the noise of an argument now eerily still. Inside, Shazmin lay on the floor, motionless, blood pooling around her. She was still alive, barely. Paramedics worked fast, loading her onto a stretcher, trying to keep her with them for just a little longer. They rushed her to Advent Health Central Texas, but the damage had already been done. By the time the doctors tried to save her, she was already gone. Word spread quickly. Calls were made, friends and family flooded social media with messages of disbelief, heartbreak, anger. Some had just spoken to her hours ago. Some had watched her live stream the night before, commenting, laughing along with her, thinking she had finally broken free from the nightmare. And now she was gone. But there was no mystery about who had done this. Witnesses saw him, people knew. The same man who had spent weeks trying to pull her back, the man who had turned to social media to control her even after she had left him, the man who had stayed silent for the first time in weeks. He was the only one who could have done this. Now the question wasn't who, it was where. Where had Alonzo Hunter gone? In the hours following Shazmin Clack's murder, the weight of what had happened settled over Copper's Cove like a storm cloud. News of her death spread fast, reaching phones, news feeds, and group chats before the police had even finished processing the crime scene. For those who had seen her just the night before, smiling, dancing, embracing the freedom she had long fought for, it didn't feel real. But for law enforcement, there was no time for disbelief. The investigation had to move quickly. The longer a suspect remained at large, the harder they were to catch, and in this case there was no question about who they were looking for. Alonzo Hunter's name was the first to be spoken by witnesses, and his connection to Shazmin was impossible to ignore. They had shared a child. They had a history of public disputes, and for weeks Alonzo had been spiraling in full view of the internet, dragging their personal battles onto a public stage for thousands to witness. When officers arrived on Tanner Drive, they moved methodically through the home, scanning for clues, piecing together the final moments before the gunfire erupted. The front door had been left ajar, a chilling invitation into the aftermath of a life taken too soon. Inside, nothing seemed to indicate a break-in, no shattered glass, no signs of forced entry. Whoever had pulled the trigger had been let in. It was exactly what they had expected. Witnesses had already provided key details. A neighbor reported hearing voices, a heated argument just minutes before the shots rang out. Another had seen a car idling outside Shazmin's home earlier that morning, the driver barely visible behind tinted windows. It wasn't until the gunfire erupted that the car had sped off, disappearing before anyone had the chance to get a clear look at the plates. Police had no doubt Alonzo had been there. But now he was gone. Within hours, an all-points bulletin, APB, was issued. Law enforcement agencies across Texas were put on alert. Patrol officers were given a description of Alonzo and the vehicle he was last seen driving. His known addresses were checked, but he wasn't there. His phone went straight to voicemail. It was clear he was running. But the question was, where could he go? Alonzo wasn't an experienced fugitive. He wasn't a career criminal with an escape plan carefully laid out. He was a man who had acted on impulse, fueled by emotion, and now he was left to deal with the consequences. If he had a plan, it was sloppy. If he thought he could disappear, he was wrong. The police started with the obvious: friends, relatives, anyone who might have received a call or text from him. They combed through his social media, looking for any clues that might hint at his next move. His most recent posts had been deleted, but nothing vanished from the internet completely. Investigators pulled his digital footprint, scouring through old messages, past locations, anything that might lead them to him. Then they got a break. A tip came in. A hotel in Copperas Cove, less than 5 miles from the crime scene. A man matching Alonzo's description had checked in just hours after the shooting. He had paid in cash, kept his head down, and asked for a room on a high floor. Was he hiding, waiting, planning his next move? There was no time to waste. Officers moved quickly, surrounding the hotel, blocking off exits, ensuring there was nowhere left to run. When police reached the hotel room door, there was no immediate answer. They knocked again. Silence. Then, footsteps. Slow, reluctant. The door creaked open an inch, just enough for them to see him standing there. Alonzo Ezekiel Hunter. He didn't fight, he didn't argue, he didn't make a run for it, he simply surrendered. As officers cuffed him, his face remained blank, expressionless, as if the gravity of what he had done hadn't fully settled in. The man who had spent weeks raging online, who had aired out every grievance for the world to see, who had claimed betrayal, who had demanded control, now, in this moment, had nothing left to say. By the time Alonzo was booked into jail, the news had already broken. Headlines ran across local stations. Social media flooded with reactions. Friends of Shazmin took to Facebook, expressing grief, disbelief, and anger. Some blamed Alonzo entirely. Others pointed to the toxic cycle that had played out publicly, wondering how it had gotten to this point. Alonzo was charged with murder and held on a $500,000 bond. His first court appearance came swiftly. Standing before the judge, clad in an orange jumpsuit, his demeanor was eerily calm. He spoke little, responding only when prompted. There were no outbursts, no tears, no remorse. But the weight of his actions had already set in. The crime he had committed had taken Shazmin's life, and now his own was forever altered. His freedom was gone, his future uncertain. But one question still remained. Why did he pull the trigger? What was the final thought that went through his mind before he raised the gun? Had he planned this? Had he known from the moment he drove to her house that morning that he wouldn't be leaving without ending her life? Or was it something else? A final argument that escalated beyond his control, a moment of rage he instantly regretted? The truth, whatever it was, would soon be revealed. But for Shazmin's family, for her children, for the people who had loved her, no answer would ever be enough. The courtroom was silent as the judge entered, the weight of the case pressing down on everyone in attendance. The air was thick with grief, tension, and a quiet, burning anger. In the front row, members of Shazmin Clark's family sat motionless, their faces unreadable, their emotions held back by the sheer force of will. They had waited for this moment, but what could justice really mean when the one they loved was already gone? At the defense table, Alonzo Hunter sat in his orange jumpsuit, his hands resting in his lap, his expression as blank as it had been since the day of his arrest. He looked different from the man who had raged on social media just days before the murder. The confidence, the defiance, it was gone. Now he was just another defendant, waiting to hear the words that would determine his fate. The prosecution wasted no time laying out their case. This, they argued, was not an act of passion. It was not a crime committed in the heat of the moment. It was a premeditated act of violence, one that Alonzo had been building toward for weeks. The evidence was damning. They played his social media rants for the jury, his own words used against him. The Facebook posts, the accusations, the public humiliation of Shamin, the constant escalation, the bitterness that festered with every post, every message. This was not a man blindsided by betrayal, the prosecutor stated, her voice steady but sharp. This was a man consumed by control, by anger, by the belief that if he could not have her, no one else could. She turned to the jury, letting the weight of her words settle. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is not just a domestic dispute gone too far. What we have here is a man who made a choice that left 5 children without a mother, a choice that he cannot take back. The evidence only grew stronger. Witnesses testified about the final argument, how neighbors had heard the yelling, the tension in their voices, the unmistakable sound of gunfire that followed. They described seeing Alonzo's car parked outside Shazmin's house that morning, watching as he paced back and forth before finally entering. A forensic expert took the stand, explaining how the gunshot wounds told a story of their own. This was not a distant attack. The shots were fired at close range, deliberate, calculated. There was no sign of self-defense, no struggle that could justify what had happened. Then came one of the most powerful moments of the trial. Shazmin's sister, Chantel Clack, took the stand. She was composed, but there was a tremor in her voice as she spoke. "I called her that morning," she said, swallowing hard. "I called and she didn't answer, and I knew something was wrong." She paused, closing her eyes for a moment before looking directly at the jury. "My sister did everything right," she said, her voice breaking just slightly. "She tried to move on, she tried to take care of her kids, she tried to live her life, and because of him she never got that chance." The courtroom was silent. Even the defense had little to counter with. Alonzo's attorneys tried to shift the narrative. They painted him as a broken man, someone overwhelmed with emotion, someone who had lost control in a moment of unbearable pain. They argued that he had been provoked, that his reaction was fueled by the pain of betrayal. They hinted at mental instability, suggesting that his actions were the result of an emotional breakdown rather than calculated murder. But there was one major flaw in their argument. If Alonzo had lost control, if this had truly been an act of sudden rage, why had he driven away? Why had he gone into hiding? Why had he paid cash for a hotel room just miles from the crime scene instead of turning himself in? The prosecution tore apart the defense's claims. They argued that Alonzo had not snapped in the moment. He had walked into that house knowing exactly what he was about to do. Did Alonzo take the stand? No. His lawyers advised against it, knowing that facing the jury himself would only expose his contradictions. He sat there, motionless, listening to others speak about the crime that would define the rest of his life. When closing arguments were made, the jury was sent to deliberate. And then the wait began. It took only 4 hours for the jury to reach a decision. When they returned to the courtroom, Shazmin's family braced themselves. Alonzo sat rigid, his hands clasped together. The judge read the verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder. A wave of emotion swept through the courtroom. Some sighed in relief, some wept quietly, others sat frozen, as if the reality of it hadn't yet sunk in. Alonzo showed no reaction, no tears, no outbursts, just acceptance. Then came sentencing. The judge did not hesitate. The state had argued for the harshest punishment, and they got it. Alonzo was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Shami's family, it was justice. But was it enough? Because at the end of the day, nothing could bring her back. She would never see her children grow up, never celebrate another birthday, never get another chance to live the life she had been so close to reclaiming. And now her 5 children would grow up without their mother. All because one man refused to let go. Shaz McClock should still be here. She should be raising her children, chasing her dreams, living the life she fought for. Instead, her story ends in tragedy, a tragedy that could have been prevented. Her case is closed, the verdict has been given, but the conversation is far from over. So the question now is, what will we do with the lessons her story has left behind? If this case has shown us anything, it's that the warning signs are often there, but too often they are ignored. If you or someone you know is in a dangerous relationship, don't wait. Help is out there. Reach out to a trusted friend, family member, or one of the many organizations dedicated to protecting those at risk. Your safety, your life, your future, they matter. And now, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you think justice was served? What could have been done differently? Let us know in the comments below. Your voice matters. If you found this story important, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another case like this. The more people who see these stories, the more awareness we bring to the realities of domestic violence, toxic relationships, and the consequences that come when control turns deadly. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.